Hello everyone, it is me, Cringe Captain 613, reporting for duty. And in today's video, we are going to react to Mr. Nightmare. And since it's actually summertime, I'm thinking about let's stick with the summer topic. So we're gonna react to 3 of his videos actually, so I'm being really nice for everyone, and I feel like reacting to 3 videos. Yes, so you're gonna see like a reaction from me, and you're gonna see how horrified I might be because his stories, whew, they hit the spot really quickly. So, the first one I'll be listening to is 3 Scary True Last Day of School Horror Stories. And then the next one will be 3 Creepy True Beach House Horror Stories. Again, summer related. And then afterwards, 2 Creepy True 4th of July Horror Stories. And that will be the last one. And they're about like 20 minutes or like a bit longer, so I think this one's the longest. 28 minutes for the beach house one. I'm screwed. Okay, so let's watch it. And also, I just realized something. You don't like when I get scared, do you? I saw your... So on this video I made 3 months ago about reacting to Mr. Nightmare videos part 8. But also it was a challenge. I'm trying not to get scared. I've noticed you guys got me to 5 likes. And then I have 1 random comment. You really must like to torture me. But you know what? I'm gonna reward and keep on going to react to Mr. Nightmare the best as I can, because if you love the reaction I do, I'll keep on going. I'll keep on making these videos. I'm doing this for all you. I'm not doing it for myself. I love you. But also I hate you for torturing me. But I love you too. Okay, let's get started. This is gonna be a long video already. I can already tell. Is my volume good? Hold on. Let's put it at 34. Yeah. Alright, let's start.
This happened a couple of years ago, right before school ended. It was the last day of 8th grade. It was exactly what you'd expect on the final day of middle school. Excitement and bittersweet goodbyes. Everyone was running around, scribbling signatures and cheesy messages in each other's yearbooks. My middle school was huge, easily over 1,000 students. So to keep things manageable, the teachers collected our yearbooks and passed them around to different classrooms, making sure everyone who wanted to got a chance to sign. I'm sure you could see how that could create problems. Anyone who wanted to could write whatever they wanted in anyone's yearbook. The teachers tried their best to prevent things from getting out of hand. But I knew a few kids who wrote some mean messages to people they didn't like. At the end of the day, when I got my yearbook back, I flipped through the pages eagerly, reading all the goofy notes from my friends. But as I scanned the pages, something caught my eye. There was a signature below the face of someone I had never seen before. His name was Samuel Robinson III, a name I'm going to remember for as long as I live. The message he wrote was short, simple, and honestly a bit unsettling. It read, "Hags, I'll be seeing you again." I stared at the page, confused out of my mind. I had never even spoken a single word to this Samuel kid. It wasn't like there was anything I could do about it, though. The school year was over, so I couldn't see him even if I wanted to. I just chalked it up to some weird kid being weird, or maybe an honest mistake.
Roblox is way more fun when you have Robux, but Robux cost money, and that—
You know what? Oh wait, there's a skip option. But you know what? Before we continue with this, I'm just gonna say, whenever there's an advertisement, I'm just gonna pause this recording so you don't have to see the advertisement, because In my last reaction video, which was 3 months ago, you did see it. So I will pause on the recording, and then while the advertisement plays on, I'll pause it once it's done, and then I'll pause the video, and then continue with the reaction video. So you don't have to see the advertisements. I just realized that's a good idea. That's what I'm doing. Just saves the video time, I guess. Alright, let's continue.
Either way, I stopped thinking about it. A few hours passed, and before I knew it, I was at home hosting a sleepover in my basement with my best friends Kevin, David, and Kieran. The four of us ate Doritos and played Call of Duty all night. My parents' bedroom was 3 floors above us, so we didn't have to worry much about keeping the
When they say basement, I thought it was expecting a little more creepiness, but that looks like a cozy vibe for our basement. My basement does not have that cozy vibe. It's kind of creepy down there. Yeah.
noise down. We were messing around on my dad's rowing machine sometime just before 2 when we heard a sharp knock at the storm door. The sound instantly silenced us. Who the hell would knock on the storm door?
Forget what I just said about being nice and cozy and peaceful in the basement. What? Back upstairs, go to your room, hide under your bed. That's what I'll do. If someone knocked on some type of door or window just from the basement, hell no. Get out of there. Get out. Even if it's your neighbor or something. I'm sorry. I don't like basements in the first place. I don't like it. Basements are not my thing. I don't trust it. No. I would never go down there in the first place. Like, now I just got the chills. I got the chills just thinking about this. Can you see that? I actually do have the chills. I'm not kidding. I actually do.
It must have been someone who either didn't want to wake my parents up, or knew we were down there, or both. It didn't make sense. The person kept knocking in the same rhythmic pattern. I could tell Kieran was about to say something, and I could...
A heartbeat? Call me crazy, but I think that was like a heartbeat knocking like this. If you heard my knocking, it sounds like the exact video. It's like your heart pounding. Call me crazy, but I think that's what I heard. Okay, continue.
Couldn't stop him in time. In a loud and assertive voice, he asked who was there. I wanted to knock him out. He had basically broadcasted to whoever was out there that we were down there. My basement doesn't have any external windows, so it was unlikely that they had known we were down there, but now they did. After a long pause and no more knocking, a muffled voice answered back. He said, "Come around to the back door," in a high-pitched voice that genuinely sounded cheerful, like he was a friend of ours trying to join the sleepover. It was definitely a teenager's voice too, and it didn't sound like someone who was pretending to raise their voice either. I was pretty scared, I can't lie. My friends were seemingly unfazed though.
Don't
They
do
thought
it.
It was somehow exciting that some random kid was outside my house.
Don't you
They
dare.
insisted that I at least check it out, even though I didn't want to. They pressured me into it. We crept upstairs, careful not to make too much noise. I approached the back door slowly,
the
trying to
damn
ignore the
chills.
pounding in my chest. Through the narrow glass pane beside it, I could see a shadowy figure standing under the dim light. I got a little closer, and his face came into view. My jaw nearly hit the floor when I realized who it was. It was him. It was that kid Samuel Robinson III who had signed my yearbook. My friends went to go open the door, God knows why, but I stopped them, saying I knew who it was. I explained to them what had happened. That changed
I
their
got
mood
the
a bit.
chills.
Keep in mind, Sam was still standing outside while we were talking, and he could definitely see in at us. He must have noticed how freaked out I was, because he started motioning to the side of the house like he wanted me to go over to the window. You might be wondering why none of us were taking the situation more seriously. I honestly think it was because it wasn't like some older, strange man was harassing us. It was a kid from our own school. Still, I wasn't opening the door for him. Instead, I went over to my kitchen window and cracked it open just a tiny bit. My friends followed me and stood a little off to the side. He walked over to the window and I asked him what he wanted, telling him I recognized him from our yearbook. He said, "Oh, so you got my message," and introduced himself as Sam. Then he went on to say he always watched me from afar, and that we could have been good friends. I agreed with him just so that I wouldn't piss him off, but there was 0% chance I would have been friends with this kid given any circumstances. I didn't want to press him right away, but I had to know, so I asked him how he knew where I lived. He didn't respond, and I didn't know what to say. Before I could de-escalate the situation, David called him a creepy stalker and told him to piss off. Sam's smile disappeared. He tilted his head like he didn't understand what David had just said. Then, just as quickly, his expression twisted into something I can only describe as hatred. He went from passive and honestly kind of friendly to aggressive and angry. He started screaming things at me, how he hated my friends and thought we should all die, how my ex hated me and random stuff he had no right knowing. He reached toward the window and tried to force it open, but I jammed.
Hold on. Boy! That's probably the ex's friend or somewhere in the family member section, and they were told where you lived, and the ex basically wants you. That's crazy! I feel bad for this person, actually, now thinking about it. Well, I don't know if I should, because I don't know what was the motive of breaking up in the first place. But still, that has to be the ex's job. The ex's boyfriend or ex's girlfriend situation doing this to the young boy. It has to be. Just feels like it.
It shut and locked it. He started snarling at the window and banging on it like an animal. He was 2 seconds away from shattering it, I'm telling you. We must have caused quite the commotion, because my parents came rushing down the stairs, demanding to know why we had woken them up. That's when Sam ran away. I told my parents what happened as quickly as I could, and my dad raced outside in his underwear. He came back a few minutes later, saying he had no idea where the kid went. I'm not sure why, but my parents didn't call the police. They just told us to go back to sleep and they'd deal with the school the following morning, just to give the kid the benefit of the doubt. The next morning, they contacted the school. That's when we learned the disturbing truth. Sam had been expelled a few weeks before the year finished, and he shouldn't have ever been at the school on the last day. Apparently, the yearbooks were printed before his expulsion, which explained why his picture was still included. That meant he had snuck into the school somehow just to write me that message, which freaked me out beyond belief. Despite working with the school to find out more, nobody could track Sam down. It was like he and his parents didn't exist. The whole thing was a pretty big deal, but the school did what they could to keep things under wraps. To this day, I still have no idea how he knew where I lived. That's what freaks me out the most. The running theory is that he was a mentally challenged and troubled young boy who took a strange liking to me for whatever reason, and then he stalked me for who knows how long. My parents were worried for weeks. It's something we don't talk about anymore because it's just uncomfortable, but living in that same house has never felt the same ever since.
I feel the same if I was in that situation.
Imagine being able to build anything just by thinking about it. Meet Base 44.
You didn't let me pause, but... Okay, fine. Skip option. I tried.
My friend
it didn't
Garrett
work.
is a little unhinged, and when I say a little, I mean a lot. He's one of those guys that goes around boasting about how crazy and aggressive he is, like it's cool or something.
What?
He's constantly getting into fights, doesn't know how to keep his mouth shut.
He cannot be your friend then, I'm sorry. If he's that aggressive, you are re-questioning your friendship level with him. Just saying.
And spends more time in the gym than anywhere else, including his own house. There
A gym? He's gonna turn into a murderer killer machine.
There are actually 5 stories about him I could choose to tell, but the scariest one by far is the one you're about to hear. It also directly involves me, and I feel much more comfortable telling my own story rather than someone else's. This happened a couple of weeks ago, which was also coincidentally the last day of senior year, May 2019. The graduation ceremony wasn't scheduled for a few days, so even though we were done, we still had to stick around. It's tradition for all the graduating seniors to get plastered on the last day of classes, so that's exactly what we did. There's this huge clock tower in the center of campus where all the seniors convene to get drunk, which is exactly where we were at 10 p.m. It was packed. There were over 1,000 people crammed into that one courtyard. It was bittersweet, for me at least, but I think everyone was relieved at having finished finals, which are pretty tough at my school. There are a handful of other senior traditions I could tell you about, but I'm going to try to keep things succinct. There were 6 of us. It was me, C, T, R, N, and obviously Garrett. I don't think the rest of my friends would be comfortable with their names out there, so I'm just calling them by their initials. I should also really quickly mention that we lived off campus, meaning we had to walk through the city to get home. There are a decent amount of homeless people in that city, so it's not rare to encounter some of them late at night. Anyway, we were heading back home from the clock tower when Garrett did some Garrett stuff. Well, it wasn't really his fault, but that's neither here nor there. As we were crossing the street, some random homeless guy ran up to our group and started tweaking. Usually, the homeless people around here keep to themselves since they're all tripping on drugs and didn't notice their own surroundings. But this guy clearly wanted to engage. He was just standing in the middle of the crosswalk, yelling things at us like he was a bridge troll protecting the other side of the street. We laughed a little and started walking in a wide semicircle around him, as we didn't want to piss him off or antagonize him. Well, everyone but Garrett, that is. Instead of disengaging, Garrett started yelling things back at the guy, telling him to get the F out of the street and to stop harassing strangers. The tweaker didn't like that and took a few aggressive steps toward him. That's when the rest of us jumped in to prevent an altercation from happening. We must have intimidated the tweaker because he stopped charging and went back to just yelling things. I pulled Garrett out of the street, trying to get him to behave, but he pushed my hand away. Before any of us could do anything, he charged full speed at the tweaker and screamed, "I'm crazy." The tweaker started running away, which caused Garrett to stop charging and start laughing. I know it's bad, but the scene was genuinely funny, as messed up as it was. It was like running full speed into a flock of birds and watching them scatter. We started walking towards our house after that, but after a few minutes, we realized the tweaker was following us. When he caught us looking back at him, he started yelling things about how we had made a big mistake and how he was going to, quote, call a niche, whatever that meant. We started heckling the guy back, hoping he'd get scared and leave. But I'm pretty sure we only intensified whatever tantrum he was having. Look, I'm not proud of everything that happened that night, but we were about to graduate from a very prestigious university and had been celebrating all night with alcohol, so we weren't in the right headspace to properly evaluate the situation. About a block away from our house, we realized the guy was still following, albeit a little further back now. I told the rest of the guys I didn't feel comfortable leading him to our house, and the other guys agreed. So naturally, Garrett took off toward the homeless guy before the group could come to a consensus. He again started sprinting at the guy, who once again fled in the opposite direction. Garrett turned and jogged back towards us, and we all jogged up the street. We thought that was it. We made it back to our house, pretty confident we hadn't been followed that time. I'm not even going to go into what we did back at the house. Let's just say it was a level of degeneracy I won't be approaching anytime soon. I can't even tell you what time it was. I was stumbling out of the front door to pick up my DoorDash when I noticed something odd. The side gate that led into our backyard was wide open. It was especially weird because we used this little strand of twine to keep it shut, so the door being open meant that someone had deliberately undone it. I instantly made the connection. It was probably that guy from earlier. I had enough sense to connect the dots, but I guess I didn't have enough sense to react accordingly. The smart thing would have been to alert my friends, but my drunken self decided to investigate. I put the DoorDash on the porch and went around the house, trying my best to walk straight.
Oh, honey, no. If you're not walking straight and you're going to investigate, R.I.P. That's all I gotta say. Because you're gonna meet someone who's not right in their mind. Just saying. Now I'm kind of questioning, do I want to get drunk in the future after seeing this video? I have no idea.
I turned the corner into the backyard, and before I could even see, I felt a rope around my throat. I flailed around wildly, but it was no use. Someone was strangling me from behind, and there was nothing.
There's no way I just said R.I.P. That. Oh my god, that sounds so violent. Now actually my throat feels so discomfort just from that. Oh my god. I'm sorry. That really spooks me a bit. Don't trust your back. Always look behind your back. Just say it. I got nothing
I could do about it. I felt the rope's frayed ends digging into my throat as he tightened it with all his strength. I genuinely thought I was gonna die. With all my might, I swung my legs backward, and he lost his footing. The two of us hit the ground, and I could breathe again, but he was still on top of me. In a fit of rage, he clawed at my face, and I could feel blood streaming down my cheeks. I threw him off of me, and he got to his feet before running out of sight. I'll try and keep things short from here on out. I ended up having to go to the hospital that night. The cuts weren't bad, but I needed a bunch of shots to protect me against any kind of diseases the guy might have had. The police were less than helpful, and since I was moving out a week later, there wasn't much I could do either. The worst part about the whole thing was that I had visible cuts in all my grad photos. Garrett felt so bad he ended up taking me to Nobu, but I never held anything against him. I just hope he's learned his lesson about not antagonizing people who have nothing to lose.
He almost died. That's awful. Okay, well, let's pause this now.
7th grade, there was this kid named Sven in my homeroom. To put it mildly, he was a bit... When I was in the 7th grade, there was this kid named Sven in my homeroom. To put it mildly, he was a bit strange. He was one of those kids who didn't socialize with anyone else, even though people frequently tried to include him in things. I didn't have all my classes with him, but from what I remember, he would always sit in the same spot in every room, the back corner opposite the door. Without fail, he'd show up to school in the exact same outfit every day, cargo shorts and an oversized burgundy hoodie. He obviously didn't talk much, but when he did have to answer a question or read a passage, he had a really deep voice that lots of other kids made fun of him for. I don't recall him having any friends at all, which made sense. This one time, my friend Tyler caught him slicing worms during recess, which I'm pretty sure he ended up getting detention for. Speaking of recess, Sven would spend the whole period by himself next to the fence that bordered the woods. He never played any games or did anything even remotely kid-centric. He'd just stand next to that fence doing God knows what. Some of my friends claim to have seen him talking to someone on the other side, but I've personally never seen that, so I'm not going to spread potential lies. I'm trying to think of other things about him worth mentioning. He had several quirks and some other weird habits typical of any strange middle schooler, but none relevant to the story I'm going to tell. This happened on the last day of school. I went to a pretty big middle school with lots of kids per grade, meaning there were a ton of concurrent classes with students from the same year happening at all times. Because of that, there was this last day of school tradition where students from the same year would sneak into and sit in random classrooms to try and mess with the teachers. I'm pretty sure the teachers were privy to this and played along to amuse the kids, but that's neither here nor there. I don't remember the exact time this happened, but I do remember I was in one of the few classes I shared with Sven. Everything was exactly as it had been all day. The entire class was mixed up with random students that were supposed to be elsewhere. I was kind of a stickler for rules growing up. That's just how I was raised, so I never participated in any of the tomfoolery. My friends all did though, so I was often alone in all of my classes since they went to other rooms together. This was one of those times. All my friends had left the room, and the only kid I knew even a little, coincidentally, was Sven. Sven was acting stranger than usual that day. That's something I remember distinctly. I can't fully remember what we were learning or doing in class, but I do remember that Sven was tapping his foot pretty aggressively, something he never did. He was also constantly looking around the room, as if searching for someone or trying to keep tabs on someone. I don't think he was watching me, but I couldn't be sure. The other thing I remember was that there were a lot more kids in the class I didn't recognize. Granted, one or two wasn't anything out of the ordinary since everything was switched around, but the odds that there were so many students I had never even seen before were slim. At some point, the teacher, I'm pretty sure her name was Miss Bell, told us to get into groups of 3 or 4 to work on some kind of end-of-year reflection worksheet. Nothing serious. Most kids just used it as an excuse to talk and mess around. At one point, Miss Bell walked over to her desk, picked up the classroom phone, and turned her back to us. A few minutes later, another teacher showed up, I think from the room next door. They stepped just outside the classroom door and started whispering. It wasn't a long conversation, maybe half a minute, but something about it felt off, like they were trying not to cause a scene. I could tell something was up. Miss Bell looked uneasy. That's honestly the best way I can describe her demeanor. After they finished talking, Miss Bell and the other teacher came back into the room. They didn't say anything to the class. They just walked over to a few specific kids and knelt down beside their desks. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but whatever it was quiet, clearly like they didn't want the rest of us to notice. A minute later, those same kids got up and followed the teachers into the hallway. No one really reacted. I felt like I was the only one who even noticed what was going on. Miss Bell came back a few minutes later, alone this time. She didn't say anything about the kids who left, just sat back down at her desk and started shuffling papers like nothing had happened. But right after she did, the fire alarm went off. Miss Bell didn't really react, like she knew it was going to happen. She told us to line up and head outside, and we joined the rest of the school out by the field behind the building. As usual, everyone was grouped by homeroom, so I ended up standing with a bunch of familiar faces again. But while we were all standing there, I looked back at the school for no reason, just out of habit, I guess. And I could have sworn I saw something move in one of the second-story windows. It was quick, and maybe it was just a reflection or a shadow or something, but it felt wrong. The school was supposed to be completely empty. I kept it to myself, but I was really scared when it came to re-entering the building. We never went back inside, though. Before the alarm even stopped ringing, we started hearing sirens. A few minutes later, police cars started pulling into the lot. Not just 1 or 2, but a whole line of them. They didn't waste time either. Officers jumped out and rushed straight into the building. No one explained anything. Teachers just told us to stay calm and wait. After a while, someone came around and said school was being let out early. No buses. We had to call our parents. We were never told what actually happened. My parents ended up telling me what happened, or at least what the school had told them. They told me that a bunch of kids who didn't even go to our school had somehow gotten in. A rumor went around that they were planning to set the place on fire. Apparently, Miss Bell had discovered some very alarming tools in one of the kids' backpacks, and the school tried flushing everyone out with the fire drill. The details are still a bit fuzzy, so I'm hoping I'm explaining everything properly. The part that really stuck with me was what my mom said at the end, that the kids had been let in by Sven through the side fence during recess. The whole thing was so bizarre, it's still difficult to process even now.
I knew there was something up with the Feng guy. I knew. That's so bad. It is. Okay, next video. Beach House Horror Stories now. Yay! I'm dead after this. Yeah, I'm afraid already.
This happened a few months ago, back in the spring. It was that strange in-between period of my life. Just graduated, no real responsibilities yet, and way too much free time. I'd finished school a semester early, which seemed like a great idea when I was drowning in assignments, but once I actually had all this free time, I had no clue what to do with it. My full-time job wasn't starting until June, and most of my friends were still busy with classes or finals, so until then, I was just floating, feeling like I was stuck in the gap between two phases of my life. It was actually really discomforting and made me feel worthless. I'm someone who always needs to be doing something productive, so just sitting around for days on end watching time pass was killing me. That's probably why I said yes when my mom asked me to check on my Uncle Rick's beach house. It was an easy favor: drive down to Rehoboth Beach, make sure nothing was leaking or damaged, and do some small maintenance to save Rick the cost of hiring someone. Oh yeah, I should probably mention that I'm from Pennsylvania, and Rick's house is in Delaware, so the drive's not so bad. Just a little over 2 hours. The house is massive, the kind that comfortably holds my entire extended family every summer. 25 of us packed into one place, playing games and drinking too much. Those two activities are honestly the only distinctive things about our family. This house isn't exactly on the shoreline, but it's not too far from the beach either. It's nestled in a quieter neighborhood, lined with tall beach grass and winding roads. Fast forward to some random day of the week that I honestly can't even remember. I think it was like a Thursday or something. I left in the late afternoon, which, in hindsight, was probably a dumb idea. The drive was pretty chill. When I got to the house, everything seemed normal. I made my way inside and ran through Rick's checklist. I checked the faucets, the breakers, and walked the property. Everything looked fine. To be completely frank, it felt strange being there alone. I'd never seen that house without miscellaneous board games sprawled about and crowds of family members noisily drinking. The silence was definitely the most eerie thing about it. The place felt abandoned or something. I'm sure all of you have that one place, be it a house or a restaurant or something else, that gets really rowdy when your whole family spends time there together. Now try to picture that place empty and silent. Kind of spooky, right? Anyway, it was getting late, and I hate driving at night more than anything, so I texted my mom to let her know I'd just stay overnight and head back in the morning. She told me that was a good idea, and reminded me to thank Uncle Rick for letting me stay there, which I did. I made myself some food, messed around on my phone for a bit, and then started washing up for the night. Usually during family gatherings, I'd get jammed into one of the smaller rooms on the 3rd floor while other relatives got to claim the nicer, bigger rooms. I'm not complaining about the system at all. I'm just telling you how things tended to go. Since I had the house to myself that night, though, I figured I'd take advantage of it. The master bedroom on the 2nd floor has a private bathroom, a massive walk-in closet, and a ridiculously comfortable bed.
Ooh.
The decision wasn't exactly difficult. I knew that's where I'd be sleeping. I climbed in around midnight and quickly drifted off. I don't remember what time it was when I woke up, only that something startled me awake. I was still a little groggy, but I was dead sure sound had just come from the closet, like something had fallen in there. Without making any noise, I craned my head to look at the closet. Even that small action sent my heartbeat racing. My mind was awake, but my body refused to move, like some kind of sleep paralysis without the paralysis. I could move, I just didn't want to. I didn't want to find out if there was something in that closet. I squeezed my eyes shut and told myself to go back to sleep.
Like an object just
I
fell.
almost did.
Yeah.
But the literal second I started drifting back into sleep, I heard it. A muffled thump from inside the closet. I squinted my eyes just a smidge and tried convincing myself I'd imagined it, but I knew I hadn't. As if overcome by some invisible force, I laid there in complete paralysis with no control over my body whatsoever. Not like before. This time it was real. I couldn't move even if I wanted to. Until that moment, I didn't truly understand what it meant to be frozen in place. I listened in horror as the closet door slowly creaked open. Through barely open eyes, I watched as a dark figure stepped into the room. It just stood there beside the bed,
That has to be a prank, right? I don't know if I'm gonna survive through all of this. If I had that happen to me, oh my god. Woo. I think my heart just stopped. I'm pretty sure my heart would have stopped. Oh my god, I hate this. Oh my god, I do have the chills already. Just oh god.
motionlessly, watching me. Maybe 20 seconds passed, each second feeling impossibly long. Then, silently, it turned and left the room. I stayed completely still, barely breathing. The footsteps moved across the floor, but instead of heading downstairs like I had expected them to, they actually creaked upstairs to the 3rd floor. My stomach churned. The only staircase led up. There was no exit from there. My mind was screaming at me to do something, but I was too afraid. I couldn't overpower a grown man. I had no idea if he was armed. The only thing I could do was wait. After a few painful moments,
Wait! If I was you, I would have just casually sneak out of there and then go to the car and then drive home. I would have been jolted awake. And then if that man went to the 3rd floor like it was mentioned, I would have sneaked out. I take my chances to sneak out. There's no way in hell I'm staying in that same spot and saying, oh, let me just casually wait for the guy to come back and see what happens. He could come back armed, and you might not survive. This better be a sick prank. I hope it is, because that spooks me really badly. I would have sneaked out. I would have.
in my own head, I worked up the courage to snap myself out of the paralysis. Quietly, I reached for my phone and dialed 911. As soon as the dispatcher picked up, I whispered as quietly as I could, telling them someone was in the house. I slipped out of bed and just as quietly turned the lock on the bedroom door. Then I waited. Minutes dragged painfully by until flashing red and blue lights illuminated the windows. I was actually kind of shocked at how quickly the police arrived. I ran down the stairs, threw open the front door, and nearly collapsed in relief when I saw the police. They didn't hesitate. They stormed inside, moving quickly through the house. I waited outside. It didn't take them long. According to them, the house was empty. I was in disbelief. I had heard the footsteps go up, and there was...
Huh? Wait. Don't tell me it was a hallucination. I swear I just lost my sanity after that. Because I swear that would make that happen to me. It would.
nowhere to go after that, so he must have still been in the house. There was no other explanation. The police insisted he must have slipped past me, that I was too freaked out to notice. I knew that wasn't true, but what could I say? The guy had vanished. I wasn't comfortable letting the police just leave, though, so I called Rick.
Hi, we're Shiming and Amber. Here's how.
Rick wasn't having it. He snapped at the police and told them to check again, and that my life might have depended on it. So they did. They searched again, more thoroughly this time. Rick told me to follow them and watch what they were doing, and so I did. The officers moved methodically, opening every closet and checking under beds, tapping at the walls like they were expecting something hidden behind them. They pulled back the shower curtain in every bathroom, double-checked the locks on the doors and the windows, and that's when they found it. One of the bedroom windows on the 3rd floor, the room I should have been sleeping in, was unlocked. One of them stood by the door, while the other one went downstairs and stepped onto the back deck. I opted to go outside with the second officer, mostly because the thought of being locked in the house with some stranger sickened me. The officer shined his light around the property, but there was nothing out there. He started scanning the roof, and to my horror, his beam swept across something terrifying. It was him. It was that stranger that had been in the house. He was just sitting there on the roof. He was this disgusting-looking bald man in tattered clothing who looked like he hadn't seen a shower in years. The next hour was a blur. The cops communicated with each other, and they got the guy off the roof in cuffs. The police said he was probably homeless and squatting in the house for days, maybe longer. But when they asked him how he got in, how long he'd been there, and why he was hiding in the closet, he didn't answer. He just kept that eerie, vacant look, like none of it mattered to him. He was in the back of one of their police cars shortly after that, and that was that. The whole thing was so crazy that it's still hard to wrap my head around. As much as I try, I cannot figure out why that guy had been hiding in that closet of all places. Maybe he heard me enter the house and hid in the first place he thought of. I still don't know how he got into the house. Rick doesn't either. It's impossible to get to the roof from the ground, so I feel like that explanation is pretty illogical. The rest of my extended family has been insisting that Rick ups his home security, but he's refused every time for reasons I can't explain. The thought that had I been sleeping in my assigned bedroom, that night might have ended very differently. My buddy Mike has a beach house on the Jersey Shore. Calling it a beautiful property would be an understatement. It's magnificent, or at least, as someone who never came from much, that's what it feels like to me. I obviously don't know the history too well. It's not my family's house after all. But from what I do know, that house has been in their family for generations. Mike's grandparents had been trying to use it as their permanent place of residence for the longest time, but unfortunately, they recently passed away. Without anyone living there anymore, the house is dormant most of the time since most of Mike's extended family lives on the West Coast, and his parents are too busy to make good use out of it. The upside to an otherwise sad situation, though, is that Mike is essentially allowed free access to it whenever he wants. I'm pretty sure it was Mike's dad's intention to rent the house out to try and make some extra cash, but as far as I know, the gears aren't exactly turning on that one. It's not exactly an easy task to find someone willing to rent out a beach house during the off-season, so you can't really blame the guy. It was sometime in mid-July when Mike hit me up and asked me if I wanted to come down for the weekend. He didn't have to twist my arm. I had nothing going on, and the thought of kicking back at a beach house, especially one that was nice, was an easy yes. His plan was simple. We'd hang out, maybe hit the beach during the day, then head to the boardwalk at night and just enjoy the shore for what it was. It wasn't some crazy party weekend or anything like that, just a chill escape from the usual, and honestly, I was looking forward to it. Mike and I lived pretty close together, so he was going to pick me up and drive me down with him. That Friday, I packed a duffel, threw it in his trunk, and the two of us made the drive down. The first night was chill. We got in sometime around 6, dropped our stuff off in the upstairs bedrooms, and settled in. The house has that cozy, slightly musty beach house smell, like a mix of salt air and old wood. Not in a bad way, more like history. You could tell it's seen decades of family summers. After grabbing a quick bite from a sub shop nearby, we decided to walk the beach for a bit, just to take in the evening. Mike brought a couple rods with him, so we figured we'd try our luck fishing for a while. It wasn't really about catching anything, though. It was more about being out there. At one point, we stumbled across a pair of girls about our age. They were walking barefoot along the shoreline, and Mike, being Mike, struck up conversation right away. They were local, or at least semi-local, and it turned into one of those low-stakes, slightly flirtatious interactions that happen naturally when you're young and on the beach at night. We got their numbers, and they continued their walk while we continued fishing. There were still a good number of people around since it was peak season, but Mike knew all the quiet pockets. Private beach access, tucked away paths through dunes, little spots between houses where the lights didn't reach. We ended up finding a nice stretch to ourselves where the only sound was the water and the wind. It was the kind of night that made you forget about real life for a bit. The next morning, we woke up around 9 and decided to go for a run along the boardwalk. It was already warm out by then, but there was a breeze coming off the ocean that made it bearable. We weren't doing anything crazy, just a couple miles to get the blood flowing. Mike's a pretty active guy, and I've been trying to stay in shape, so it felt good to move after a night of lounging around. The rest of the day kind of slipped by without us noticing. Later that evening, Mike floated the idea of hitting a few bars in Seaside, but we were both wiped. Even though the idea sounded fun in theory, the thought of waiting in line and yelling over music didn't really line up with how our bodies felt after a full day in the sun. We ended up crashing kind of early instead. Sometime after midnight, I woke up to a shrill, piercing beeping. At first, I thought it was part of a dream, but after a second or two of lying there in the dark, I realized it was real. It sounded like a smoke detector, one of those sharp, high-pitched alarms that cut straight through your skull. I threw myself out of bed and started scanning my surroundings in an effort to pinpoint where the beeping was coming from. It didn't sound like it was coming from my bedroom or anywhere else on the second floor. After focusing for a few more seconds, I got the impression that it was actually coming from above me. Without thinking, I yanked the bedroom door open and made a beeline for Mike's room. With both hands, I jolted him awake and told him to follow me. He immediately caught on to the situation and hurried after me, not even bothering to put a shirt on. As if our lives depended on it, the two of us bolted up the stairs, completely unsure of what we'd be running into. The third floor was mostly dark, except for a little bit of moonlight leaking in through the window at the end of the hallway. We flipped the lights on and started scanning the space, still expecting to see or smell something burning. But there was nothing. No smoke, no flickering lights, no signs of a fire at all, actually. It was baffling. Eventually, after some painfully irritating minutes of searching for the source of that god-awful noise, I found something. In one of the bedrooms, tucked neatly under a pillow, was a small black device. Before calling Mike into the room, I decided to examine it myself a little, mostly out of pure confusion. It was the size of a walkie-talkie, all black with the exception of a blinking red light on top. That was it. No buttons, no stickers, no screen, just a smooth jet black casing, that blinking light, and a single switch on the side. Or at least what looked like a switch. I flipped it off, and the beeping stopped immediately. Mike entered the room at the same time. His eyes flicked from the bed, to me, to the device in my hand. Neither of us said anything at first. We locked eyes, and I could tell he was just as confused and just as scared as I was. After a few more seconds of silence, he asked me if I had ever seen that black thing before. I said no and asked him the same, to which he also said no. For the next hour, we tried figuring out what that thing was, how it had gotten there, and what had triggered it. But no answer we came up with was satisfying. Mike swore none of his family members had been in that house in ages, and I believed him. I mean, why would he lie about that? Plus, who the hell would put that thing in their own home? You might think it was for safety or something, or maybe a substitute for a faulty upstairs smoke detector. But again, there was no fire, so it hadn't even prevented any emergencies. And then the matter of how it had gotten triggered in the first place. That was the scariest part about the whole thing. We were sitting in Mike's room in the dark when I had a crazy thought. I couldn't believe it hadn't occurred to me until then. The switch. I pulled out the device and very quickly flipped the switch on and off, and you guessed it. The shrill beeping started up again and stopped as soon as I flipped it off. Both of us froze, and Mike whispered, "Oh my God." The thought hit us both at the same time. The only way to operate the device was by hand. Someone else was in the house. We didn't waste any time. Mike dialed the police while I locked the door, barricading it as best I could. We waited for what felt like forever, and finally, the police showed up. We quickly made our way downstairs to intercept them. After giving them a very brief description of what was going on, they did a full sweep of the house while we waited outside by the front door per their instruction. When they finally came back downstairs, what they told us was horrifying. Apparently, every single window on the third floor was wide open, even the bathroom windows. And it wasn't just that. The beds were flipped, drawers were pulled out of dressers, and everything was on the floor. The room where I had found the device looked completely ransacked, even though it was nice and neat when we searched up there. I felt like I was losing my mind, and so did Mike. But after being escorted upstairs by the officers, we had no choice but to accept the reality. The officers didn't find much else. No one hiding, no prints, no weapons. After another 20 minutes or so, They told us to make sure all the windows were locked and secured from now on, and to call again if anything else happened. Then they just left. Mike and I didn't feel safe being in that house after someone probably crazy or on drugs, had messed with us like that, in such an unexplainable way too. But we had no choice. We told ourselves we'd sleep there the rest of the night and leave early in the morning, and that's what we did. Luckily, whoever had been in the house must have left, because nothing else happened throughout the night. There are still parts of this night I can't explain, and I can only imagine what Mike must be feeling. For all we know, whoever had been in that house that night might have never left.
Uh-oh.
This happened a decent while ago, back when I was 22. Enough years have passed to the point where I feel safe talking about it. I was fresh out of college with a desirable job and minimal expenses since I was living in my childhood home with my parents. Imagine that, racking up considerable savings without having to worry about food or a place to sleep, and all the while having full access to the room I grew up in, my car, and all my hometown comforts. It's safe to say I was living.
I just realized I forgot to react to the second story. I think my mind just stopped working after the last video at the first story. But let's just say for the second one, after I saw the tracker myself, I would have just immediately knew someone was in the house. And they were still there, so I would have called the police on the spot before going back to Mike's room for the night. Was that his name? I think so. I mean, if I was one of the boys, I would have called the police. And then the guy would probably be caught. Guy, girl, whatever. But still caught. That's terrifying. Especially you thought it would be like a fire alarm.
In pure bliss. Believe me, I knew how lucky I was to have parents who allowed me to stay at home and rent free. I know a lot of people don't have that option, so it's something I never took for granted. But not everything was as stress-free as you might think. What I'm about to tell you happened not even 1 month into my time back at home. I've never been what people my age like to call a party girl. I don't drink excessive amounts of alcohol. I don't spend every ounce of my free time at clubs. And I definitely don't allow men to dictate my life in any way. That's just how I was raised. My father is the most important man in my life, and hookup culture disgusts me. Because of all that, my life is pretty routine. Wake up, satisfy my caffeine addiction, go to work, go to the gym, read a bit of my book at home, mess around on my phone, and go to sleep. Weekends are for hiking, mini road trips, board games, and whatever else I decide I want to spend my time doing. But one random weekend, my closest friend from college, Lindsay, invited me and our other two friends, Sabrina and Thea, to spend a few days at her family's beach house. I'd never been, but from the way Lindsay talked about it, the place sounded like a dream. Quiet, tucked away from the touristy chaos on its own private beach, and just a short walk from the water. To put it bluntly, Lindsay's family is loaded. I think both her parents were neurosurgeons, so I had a feeling her beach house would be insane, and I was far from disappointed. When I first laid eyes on it, I was awestruck. Look, I'm no architect, but I know a modern-style house when I see one, and Lindsay's must have been ultra-modern because it looked more like a covert military safe house than a personal home. I'd love to show you guys pictures of it, believe me, I've got plenty, but out of respect for Lindsay's family, I think that would be in really poor taste, even if what I'm about to tell you didn't happen. The four of us unloaded our stuff and decided where we'd be sleeping. Lindsay obviously had enough individual bedrooms for all of us to occupy, but what would be the fun in that? Instead, the four of us stayed in the same room, one of the kids' bedrooms that had 2 sets of bunk beds and its own attached bathroom. We'd been staying there 3 nights, which, in my opinion, is the perfect amount of time to spend coupled up with anyone other than your family. I tend to be relatively irritable, so anyone who's not clean or polite tends to tick me off pretty easily. Not that any of my friends are, but you know how it is. I know I told you about my relatively boring lifestyle already, but if there was a time to drink, it was that weekend with my friends. So I definitely planned on letting loose a little more than I ordinarily would. We wanted to keep the first night pretty chill, though, so we walked down to the private beach connected to the house and sat in the sand, stargazing. The four of us were drinking White Claws and listening to house music on Sabrina's speaker when we noticed something in the distance. It was this faint, flickering light emanating from somewhere further down the shore. The four of us quieted down a bit and watched the light flicker on and off. The sight was kind of hypnotic, as eerie as it was. After a while, it became clear that the light was swinging back and forth, like a handheld flashlight someone was walking with. And soon after, we realized that's just what it was. It looked like 3 or 4 people casually walking in our direction, not running or stumbling or moving strangely, but strolling at a leisurely pace. As they got closer, we started hearing the sound of laughter, which caused all of us to relax a bit. Considering how late it was most likely just a group of teenagers or even people our age. They must have noticed us because at some point, one of them yelled out hi in a friendly voice. It was a guy's voice, and he sounded around our age. Thea yelled back, and we made some small talk while they made their way over to us. As they approached, we could see that it was a group of 3 guys who looked maybe a year or 2 older than we were. They all had that typical beach boy look, which I could tell right away my friends were digging, especially Thea. She's a bit crazy when it comes to guys, so I can't say I was too surprised. She knows how I feel about her lifestyle, so it's not like I'm saying anything crazy. To be fair, she is drop-dead gorgeous, and I've never seen a guy not take a liking to her. The guys sat down with their beers, and the 7 of us continued drinking. It was actually a really great time. The guys weren't overtly flirtatious, but they weren't boring either. Fast forward an hour and several drinks later, and they ultimately invited us back to their place. Personally, I was exhausted and was leaning towards going to sleep, but I could tell all 3 of my friends wanted to continue hanging out with the boys, especially Thea, of course. I decided not to spoil everyone's fun and called it a night for myself, telling my friends to go on without me. There were only 3 guys after all, and I had no intention of hooking up with anyone that night. I walked back towards Lindsay's house while the 6 of them walked along the beach, presumably towards wherever the guys were staying. I washed up and went to bed. Sometime after 3 in the morning, I woke up to a FaceTime call from Lindsay, which was confusing since she should have either been home by then or asleep next to one of the guys. I answered her in a groggy voice, and what she said woke me up instantly. She basically screamed into the phone that Thea and Sabrina had been kidnapped, and I needed to get her car immediately. Her words were like a bucket of ice-cold water being splashed across my face. I've never felt a more intense sense of fear and adrenaline. I didn't waste a second. My hands were literally shaking as I quickly threw on some clothes and sprinted down the stairs. I asked her why she had called me instead of the police, and she reassured me that she already had. She told me to stay on the line as she walked me through it. With her instruction, I managed to open the driveway gate, find her car keys, and speed out of there in a matter of minutes. She told me they were about 10 houses down the beach to the left, so that's where I started driving. She described the car and told me what direction it had gone in, and I slammed on the gas to try and catch up. There wasn't a single car on the road, and I was driving at an insanely unsafe speed. It was a miracle I didn't get pulled over. After a few minutes of driving, I noticed a car matching Lindsay's description driving slowly in the distance. Then I hung up the phone, called the police, and told them exactly where we were. The dispatcher told me to keep my distance so as not to alert them to the situation, so that's what I did. After what felt like forever, I spotted cop lights up ahead. The car ahead of me didn't try to evade the police. I can only imagine that they assumed it was an unrelated stop. I pulled the car over and watched everything unfold. It was pure chaos. The cops forcibly removed all 3 men from the SUV at gunpoint. They put them in cuffs and escorted them back to one of the cruisers. Then, one of the officers walked over to the trunk of the car and pulled it open to reveal both Thea and Sabrina, bound, and from the looks of it, pretty badly bruised. As horrifying as the whole experience was, it was nothing compared to the sequence of events told from their perspective. All 3 of them were comfortable with me writing this, by the way. We're still close in contact, so I obviously asked them. But none of them wanted to write it themselves, and for good reason. To keep things short, after I went to bed, they all continued drinking. Lindsay is the only one who remembers things clearly, since she was trying to be at least a little responsible given it was her family's house we were staying in. At some point, the guys Thea and Sabrina were with suggested they all go to bed.
So the four of them split off while Lindsay told the third guy she was going home. He was really upset about that, which Lindsay initially thought was because he wanted to get with her. She told him she would have been down but had to watch her house, and he got angry. They yelled at each other for a bit, and he ended up telling Lindsay to get the hell out of his house and never come back, which she was more than happy doing. Halfway home, though, she realized she had forgotten her purse, so she went back to get it. That's when she saw the guys throwing Thea and Sabrina into the back of the car before driving off. She called the police, then me, and that was that. Thea's parents are both lawyers, and they jumped through dozens of hoops to do two things: keep the event as far away from the public sphere as possible, and make sure those guys got maximum prison sentences. They accomplished both. Turns out the house they were staying in didn't even belong to them. It was owned by some random old couple who were on vacation in a different country. That, plus the slew of other crimes they were charged with, put them away for a long time. Although I still think there's no sentence long enough that can properly compensate for what they did. As much as I hate admitting it, this traumatized me for years. I couldn't do beaches, late nights, or talking to strangers, no matter how harmless they seemed, or how safe a situation felt. I became antisocial and drifted away from the girls for a little, but luckily that's since changed. I can't even begin to imagine how this incident affected Thea and Sabrina. Part of me feels like not remembering anything is a blessing in disguise. I think the craziest part about the whole thing is the fact that had I not gone home, I might not have been able to reach Lindsay's car in time. And had it not been for that, the police may have never found those guys' car.
Ooh, that's terrifying. Thank God you were feeling tired that you did not go with them, because you would have been caught and God knows what would have happened. They would have not made it through the night. Oh, yay, the last story. Oh, this is not going to go too well.
This happened just last year. My buddy Jimmy is pretty involved and well connected within the music community. By music community, I'm more specifically referring to the dance/electronic music scene all along the East Coast, predominantly New Jersey and New York. It's actually pretty impressive what he and his team have been able to accomplish in just 2 years. The general gist is this: their company hosts what they call events at high-profile venues, typically the most well-known club or party space in whatever city they happen to be in. Then they outsource the talent, which, mind you, is typically a very well-known and sometimes borderline famous DJ. I'm not too involved or invested in that scene, so I'm not exactly sure who they've gotten to perform, but I will tell you that there have been some huge names in the mix. But enough context. Jimmy and I go way back. I'm talking 20 plus years. I've basically known him my entire life, and he's been my best friend for damn near most of it. Because of that, he lets me, along with a bunch of our other hometown friends, come to his shows for free and hang out with the talent in the VIP section. It's actually really cool, and something I wish I expressed my gratitude for more often. Jimmy was scheduled to host a huge event the weekend of July 4th on the Jersey Shore. It was going to be their biggest one yet, and all our mutual friends were going. Jimmy invited me to come down early with him, and I obviously obliged. The two of us made the hour-and-a-half drive with our other friend Ryan, and we found ourselves at the venue a good 4 hours before the doors opened. Ryan and I didn't have much to do while Jimmy and his team set up, so we decided to get a bit of a head start on the alcohol consumption. Jimmy and his team were entitled to as much free booze as they desired, compliments of the venue, and Ryan and I definitely took advantage of that. By the time the first DJ started his set, Ryan and I were more than a little buzzed, to put it mildly. It was 4th of July weekend after all, so we felt like our degenerate activities were justified. Fast forward a couple hours, and Ryan and I were completely wasted. I honestly don't remember a time since then when I was that drunk, not even close. Don't get me wrong, Ryan and I are grown men, we can handle our alcohol. Throwing up, making fools of ourselves wasn't the issue though. It was genuinely just the problem of having lower impulse control and worse decision making. But either way, we were having a great time, at least from what I can remember. The event was winding down, and it was getting to that point in the night where you either figured out how you were getting home, or who you were going home with, or both. Jimmy had rented an Airbnb really close by, and promised both Ryan and I a bed, so the first issue wasn't a concern. The second problem, though, that was what was on my mind. The two of us danced over to the bar and started talking to some girls we found attractive, and before long, we had figured out who we were going to spend the rest of the night with. Neither of us are Calvin Klein models, but we're both above 6 feet tall. For whatever reason, the vast majority of guys who hang around the Jersey Shore are usually shorter than average, so being tall is an even bigger boost than it usually is. And for whatever reason, that seems to be the main attribute most girls on the Jersey Shore seek out. Not looks, not build, not intelligence, but height. Don't ask me why. The Jerseyan female mind is still something I have yet to comprehend. I'm probably botching their names, but I'm fairly sure the two girls introduced themselves as Gianna and Marcela. Us meeting them coincides with where my ability to recall events precisely becomes a bit hazy, so there may be gaps in the story from here on out. From what I can remember, it was actually Marcela who suggested we all leave together and continue to party elsewhere, which Ryan and I weren't going to argue with. Gianna handed the two of us a drink and insisted that we get on their level before heading out, even though we had both probably consumed the fluid equivalent of her body weight in alcohol already. I know that whole dynamic. Girls getting guys drinks sounds a little unorthodox, and it is. But these girls were clearly wealthy given how they were dressed. After downing the drinks, the four of us started moving towards the venue's exit. The moment we stepped outside, Marcela suggested we go back to her place, which was pretty close by, and also right on the beach. Her saying that actually surprised me a little. I was fully anticipating going back to our Airbnb, considering the guys were usually the ones to host in situations like this. But both girls insisted that Marcela's beach house was definitely nicer than whatever inland Airbnb we found for the night. She had a point, so I didn't argue, and neither did Ryan. We walked along the beach, talking the whole time. The girls seemed really intelligent and knowledgeable based on the conversations we had, and I remember finding it so refreshing to talk about something other than nightlife and whatever other garbage I'm used to talking to girls about for once. Not just girls, drunk people in general. At one point, I actually felt kind of embarrassed for being so drunk because I felt like I couldn't articulate myself well enough and looked like an idiot. That's when I realized I actually was feeling drunker than I had been 15 minutes earlier. But it wasn't a drunk I was used to feeling. I felt like my body was melting under my weight, as if I were going to collapse uncontrollably any second. My legs felt flimsy, almost like cardboard, if that makes any sense. Moving my limbs, mouth, and even my eyes became increasingly more difficult, and there was a moment where my extremities started feeling a little numb. But then, just as quickly as the feeling arose, it passed, back to normal drunkenness, at least for the time being. Just then, we arrived at the beach house. It was insane. I'm probably exaggerating because I was so drunk, but it looked like what I imagined a professional athlete's beach house to look like. We went inside, and after taking our shoes off, found ourselves in what I'm guessing was a living room. I say guessing because the level of opulence in there was just so foreign to anything I'm used to. It was decorative, but somehow minimalistic. Even those descriptions are opposite. There were honest-to-God sculptures on pedestals in there, but it didn't feel cluttered or overly showy, and everything on display seemed to blend right into the walls, like they were just extensions of the room. I wish I had the wherewithal to take a picture, but again, my mind was elsewhere. Evidently, so was Ryan's, because not 15 minutes after stepping foot in the house, he and Marcela had disappeared somewhere in that maze of a house, which left me alone with Gianna. She leaned in to kiss me, and that's the last thing I remember before blacking out. Not her kissing me, but leaning in to kiss me. That's where everything cuts off. I don't remember feeling woozy again or drinking more or doing anything else, but there's a huge gap in my memory that spans several hours and will not come back no matter what I try. And the thing is, I know I didn't pass out because there are texts on my phone sent from me proving I was still conscious. There's digital proof that I was sentient, but I don't remember one bit of it. And before you say I just simply blacked out from alcohol, this was different. I rarely ever black out, but all the times I have, I can still remember bits and pieces of the night, scattered moments here and there, enough for me to string together a continuous sequence of events at the very least. Keep in mind, those were also all times where I was drunker than I was that night, so that's another reason I think a generic blackout isn't a reasonable explanation for what happened. Plus, Ryan experienced the exact same thing at essentially the exact same time, which is way too specific to be coincidental. Here's the next thing I remember. Waking up with the sun directly overhead in a random set of bushes over an hour away from where the event was. Something I didn't know yet because my phone wasn't in my pocket. In fact, nothing was in my pocket at all. Both my wallet and keys were gone, but it gets worse. It wasn't even my pocket to begin with. I was wearing someone else's clothes, and not Ryan's either. A complete stranger's. The only personal belonging of mine I still had in my possession was my shoes, and even those were messed up. Both shoes had the shoelaces removed and were soaking wet. My head was pounding, and everything felt disoriented, like I was waking up from anesthesia. I didn't even sit up right away. I just stared at the sky for a minute, trying to make sense of where I was. Bushes, someone else's clothes, no wallet, no phone, no keys. Based on my shoes, it was like I had been in the water recently, but I didn't smell like salt water or chlorine. The worst part about the whole thing was the blankness. I genuinely couldn't remember anything past Gianna leaving, like I already said. That's when the panic started to creep in. I wasn't just hungover, I was scared. I had no idea how I got there. What if I'd gotten into a fight or crashed a car? What if someone drugged me? I didn't have a single point of reference for the last 10 hours. I stood up and realized there wasn't a single landmark around me. It didn't look like a beach town, which also scared me. The road ahead just curved into more trees, but just across the street, maybe a few hundred feet away, was a 7-Eleven. It was genuinely the only thing in sight, so I headed straight for it. I asked the guy behind the counter if I could use his phone, telling him that mine had been stolen. He stared at me for a second, probably debating whether or not I was trying to scam him, but then he slid it across the counter. The first number that came to my mind was my sister's. It was the only number besides my mom or dad's I still memorized, and there was no way in hell I was calling my parents. My sister picked up right away, and I tried explaining things the best I could. She ended up giving me Ryan's number, which I ended up calling several times, but to no avail. That's when I started wondering if what had happened to me happened to him too. Drugged, robbed, dumped in some random bushes an hour away. I was just about to call the police, when what do you know, Ryan walks into the same 7-Eleven. We just stared at each other for a second before dabbing each other up. He then told me his version of things, and you guessed it, it was the same story, damn near exactly. That sealed it for us. We called the police, making sure to thank the 7-Eleven worker profusely. Fast forward a few minutes, and we're now recounting our story to the police outside the store. To their credit, they took everything we said seriously, at first. But the more we told them, the more their questions started turning. Were we sure we didn't just drink too much? Maybe we wandered off and passed out somewhere. They weren't accusing us outright, but it was clear they weren't entirely convinced something criminal happened. I told them it was unlikely we would have drunkenly wandered into a town an hour away by foot, and I don't think they liked that remark very much. I gave them my sister's number and asked them to call her. She was already tracking my phone through Find My iPhone. To all of our collective surprise, my phone was showing up in the middle of a parking lot a few minutes' drive away. The officers agreed to drive us, and sure enough, both our phones were sitting on the pavement next to each other. While it was great to have my phone back, that only affirmed the police's theory that we had just been drunk. They started saying that we probably hadn't even been robbed, that we had lost our wallets the same way we had lost our phones. We tried convincing the police to check out the house Marcela brought us to, the one she claimed was hers, but they weren't having it. They told us we were probably just too drunk and didn't remember things correctly. One of them even said, "It happens more than you think." Then they gave us their cards and told us to call if we remembered anything else. It was actually shocking how reluctant they were to even connect us to other officers that would be willing to help. They told us to find a ride home since our phones were still charged, and they just left us there. After they left, I went through my phone for the first time, and things got even weirder. There were texts sent from me to a ton of people I knew. Jimmy, my parents, a few coworkers, even some girls I had been talking to. All normal-sounding stuff. Stuff I might have said if I'd actually had a calm, coherent night. The texts genuinely sounded like me, but from a continuity standpoint, they didn't make any sense when considered all together. One message to Jimmy thanked him for the event and said we'd crashed at a buddy's place. One to my dad said we were safe and had found a couch to sleep on. There was another to a girl I'd been texting that just said something casual, like I was hanging out at home and thinking about her. None of those texts made any sense, and mostly contradicted each other. I realized I had a ton of missed calls and texts from Jimmy, so I called him. He sounded relieved to hear from me, saying he thought Ryan and I had died or something. He told us to stay put, he'd come pick us up. In the meantime, Ryan and I canceled all our cards, but interestingly, none of them had been used, despite the likely fact that they had been in those girls' possession for several hours. The entire ride home, we talked non-stop about what could have happened. None of it made any sense. Yeah, we had been drugged, that much was clear, but that didn't explain things. First of all, I don't know of any kind of roofie that has those effects, like an induced blackout. Everything I've read just said those drugs make you fall asleep, but again, I was conscious, as the texts confirm. Plus, why go to such lengths just to rob two random guys? Especially if you weren't going to at least even attempt to use their credit cards. Two guys who walked up to you, no less. And in such a risky place, too, your own house. Or was it a house they had broken into? Both were equally risky. Jimmy thought we had been targeted, but like I just said, we had been the ones to approach the girls, so we couldn't have been targeted. And all this isn't even mentioning how or why we miraculously found ourselves in a random town an hour away wearing other people's clothing. As crazy as it sounds, both Ryan and I checked ourselves for incisions, thinking maybe some of our organs had been harvested, but there was nothing. Jimmy suggested that maybe they had just given us some exotic drugs, which I guess makes sense, but someone had driven us to that town, and someone other than those girls had switched clothes with us. We never got an answer, but it's not like we just forgot about the whole thing. Ryan and I ended up driving all the way back to the shore just to go looking for that house. We tried our best to retrace our steps, knowing that if we just walked along the boardwalk, we'd eventually find the house, since it was on the beach. And we actually did find it. The two of us walked up the walkway and rang the doorbell. An older man opened the door, asking us what we wanted. I did the talking. Not wanting to reveal too much or potentially incriminate myself, I simply asked him if a girl named Marcela lived here, or if he had a daughter or granddaughter around our age. He gave me a hard no, and I made up some BS story that there was a girl who lied about owning this house, which he actually found pretty funny. And that was that. I would be lying if I said I didn't walk away from that house with a sick, unsettling feeling in my stomach. I can't even describe it as fear, just a sickening discomfort, like something truly awful had happened to me and my friend that night, and I'd never get to the bottom of it. For a long time after that, I was convinced those girls had been involved in something much, much bigger that neither me nor Ryan could even conceive. That maybe they had been planning to kidnap or kill us, and decided not to go through with it at the last second for whatever reason. I know I'll never have an update, but if something else happens, I'll definitely send something.
I have no words, except for at least they made it out alive. Yeah, but still, no words, and I don't know what to say. Absolutely no words.
My name's Ariel, and I live in Georgia, not too far from the Alabama border. Several summers ago, I made the drive out to this small town in Alabama for a 4th of July cookout my college friend Isabel was throwing. One of those backyard setups with paper plates, bootleg fireworks, and way too much food. It was one of the better nights I'd had in a while. Good people, good energy, kids running around with sparklers, that kind of thing. I didn't leave until a little after 10, which, looking back, was probably my first mistake. That part of the state gets real quiet once the sun goes down. The drive home was going to take a little over 2 hours. Most of the route was back roads, long, empty stretches of dark 2-lane roads with nothing but thick tree lines on either side. Every now and then, I'd pass an old farmhouse or a tiny church with a gravel lot, but for the most part, it was just darkness and more darkness. I had music playing low, and I was still in a good mood from the party, but I won't lie, there was something about driving through places like that at night that gets under my skin, even when there's no real reason to be afraid. I've always been somewhat scared of the dark, so I bet that plays into it a little too. About 30 minutes in, I noticed a pair of headlights in my rearview mirror. At first, I didn't think much of it. I figured someone else had just hopped onto the same back road. But the longer it stayed there, the more I started to pay attention. It was a gray Nissan Altima, nothing unusual, except the bottom half of the car looked like it had been driving through mud. I could see it clearly anytime we passed one of those overhead lights at a small crossing. Even still, that wasn't that weird on its own. But after a while, I realized no matter how much I sped up or slowed down, that car matched me exactly. At first, I thought it might have been just a coincidence, so I sped up a little, maybe 5-10 miles an hour over what I was doing before, but the Altima did the same. So I instead tapped my brakes and let myself drift well below the limit. Again, same results. The distance between us never changed. Now keep in mind, on roads like that, people pass each other all the time. It's not even illegal in most spots. I moved slightly to the right a couple times to make it obvious that I was giving the space they needed if they want to go around. But they didn't. They just stayed exactly where they were, about 6 or 7 car lengths back. That's when I decided to test them. There was a random left turn coming up. It was what looked like a little residential road with maybe 4 houses scattered on either side. I took the turn with no hesitation. I wanted to get as far away from that car as possible. But about 10 seconds later, the car actually turned off and made the same left turn in the middle of nowhere. There was about a 0% chance they belonged on that road. At that point, I knew for a fact they were following me. It wasn't even up for debate anymore. I got this really sick feeling in my gut, like I was in genuine danger. For all I knew, I probably was. By then, my heart was beating through my chest, the same way it would if someone had a gun to my head. I don't know.
I think I would have been terrified. You know what? This sounds like a risky move. But what if you just stop driving, and then the person who stops driving, and then what if they came out of the car and then come over to you, and then when they walk over to your car, you just speed off driving and just go? That's a thought, but again, it's a dumb idea. I doubt it'll work. But if it does work, that'll just save you the trouble, and it would save your life from any danger or harm that could have came your way.
Why? That's the easiest analogy I can think of. I just felt so helpless out there in the middle of nowhere. I had no idea what that person wanted or why they were locked onto me, but none of the reasons I could think of did anything but terrify me. I just wanted to get somewhere safe and somewhere public, with lights and people. As if on cue, I heard that god-awful chime that indicates a near-empty gas tank. I swear to God, I've never felt so powerless. My car's old. It's a 2012 Corolla that's been through more than its fair share of problems. Sometimes the gas light gives me 20 miles. Sometimes I'm lucky to get 10. And out there, in that part of the state, there's not exactly a gas station on every corner. I pulled out my phone and looked up the nearest 24-hour spot. It was over 8 miles away. I didn't know if I'd make it, but I didn't have a choice. I wasn't about to pull over, not with that car still tailing me. I thought about calling the police, but I felt like it would have been a waste of time so far out in the middle of nothingness. Cops out there take years to arrive anywhere, and there was part of me that felt like calling the police would make the danger more real. I know how irrational that sounds, and I feel pretty embarrassed even writing that down, but I'm just trying to be as honest as possible about how I felt. The gas needle dropped to empty a couple minutes later, not just low, empty. I tried to stay calm, but I could feel myself starting to spiral. Every little sound of the car felt louder. The road felt longer. I felt stupid for being so powerless, but I didn't know what to do to change that. I knew I wasn't going to make it to the gas station. Scenarios started flashing through my head about what would happen once my car ran out of gas, but by some miracle, I finally spotted the glow of the gas station sign up ahead. I almost cried, to be completely honest with you. I took the turn hard and pulled into the lot in one quick motion to give myself some time to get out of the car and book it inside. And that's exactly what I did. I jumped out and ran inside, barely shutting my car door behind me. From inside, I could see the Altima through the window. It slowed to a stop at the edge of the lot and sat there for maybe 10 seconds with the engine still running. No one got out, though. It was almost like whoever was inside was debating whether to continue pursuing me or not. And then, out of nowhere, it peeled off, fast, and disappeared back down the road we had come from. I told the gas station guy what happened, and he offered to call the police for me. Even after talking to the police, I still felt very unsettled. I know it's not the scariest thing to have happened to someone, but there's no explanation for what happened to me that doesn't involve whoever was driving that car having sinister intentions. And that feeling of pure fear, I hope I never have to experience that ever again. I made it home and told myself I'd never drive along rural back roads in the middle of the night ever again. The story doesn't end there, though. A few weeks later, something happened that made my stomach drop all over again. I was sitting at home watching the news one evening, just background noise really, when a segment came on about two men suspected of armed robbery, attempted murder, and a bunch of other things in rural Alabama. They showed a blurry still from a security camera, then mentioned that authorities believed he had fled in a stolen gray Nissan Altima, last seen headed east. When I heard that, I just froze up. That's who had been following me. I knew it in my gut. There was no way to prove it was the same person who followed me that night, but I'm telling you, I felt it. The timing lined up, the location lined up, and the description of the car was basically identical. I immediately told my story to the police, and that's when it really all hit me. My own stupidity could have prevented two extremely dangerous men from being caught. I will never forgive myself for not calling the police sooner, and it's something I actually think about pretty often. I never got an update from the police, and I never heard anything about the incident on the news. If anything ever changes, I'll send an update.
Honestly, I have no words for that. I hope everyone enjoyed today's video. Like the video and comment down what you think on the videos that you reacted to. I mean, that I reacted to. Or let me know which one you liked the most. The 4th of July one, the last day of school, or the beach house one. Which one did you like the most, and which one was the most scariest one out of them all? Like the most horrific ones. And like the video. And subscribe. Hit on notifications so you never miss an update. That's all. Goodbye.